The mechanic stepped back from my car like it had just bitten him. His face went the color of paper. And he whispered, "Ma'am, if you'd tried to take this on the freeway tonight, you wouldn't have made it to the exit." At that exact second, my phone buzzed. A text from my daughter lit up the screen. "Mom, hurry up. Don't be late. We're waiting." That was the moment I realized the danger wasn't on the road. It was sitting at a dinner table with my own flesh and blood. Before I tell you how I found out my only child wanted me dead for my house and my savings, tell me in the comments, from which city and country are you listening right now? I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you believe that no amount of money justifies betraying family, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Your support helps. These true-feeling stories about justice and betrayal reach more people who need to hear them. Now, let me take you back to the night my world split in two. The phone rang at 4:45 p.m. on a windy Thursday in late February. In Rio Rancho, New Mexico, the winter sunsets come early, turning the Sandia Mountains into something out of a painting. I was in my recliner by the front window, watching the light fade and listening to my old fridge hum in the kitchen, when the screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months. Megan. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. My heart did that little stutter it does when you get unexpected bad news or unexpected hope. I hadn't heard my daughter's voice since the day she screamed at me in this same living room about hoarding my money while she and her husband struggled. I answered on the second ring, trying to sound calm. "Hello? Hello? Hello? Mom." Her voice came through, softer than I remembered. It sounded young, almost like the teenager who used to hang upside down off our couch, asking me about boys and colleges and everything in between. "Hey, it's me. I know," I said, and my throat tightened more than I wanted to admit. "How are you, honey?" There was a pause, then a wet inhale, like she was fighting tears. "I'm okay. We've been talking about you. Me and Chase. We miss you, Mom." "Well, we miss you, Mom." Those words pressed on the sorest part of me. I'm 62 years old, a retired trauma nurse who has seen more blood and death than anyone should. I know how to stitch people up and keep a straight face while their families fall apart in the hallway. But those 4 words, "We miss you, Mom," almost undid me. "We miss you too," I managed. "I miss you. I miss you." She took a breath. "I made chile verde, your favorite, Chase grilled carne asada. We were wondering if you'd come for dinner tonight. Just us. No drama. We want to talk. Start over." If I'd been listening like Nurse Porter, the woman who spent 35 years reading people's eyes more than their words, I might have heard the strain under her sweetness. The way "start over" caught slightly in her throat. But I wasn't Nurse Porter in that moment. I was just Mom, a widowed woman who'd been eating microwaved meals alone at a table meant for 4. "I'd like that," I said too quickly. "What time?" 7 sharp, she said. "Don't be late, okay? Everything will be ready and waiting." After we hung up, I kept the phone in my hand, staring at my reflection in the darkening window. A tired woman with silver at her temples and lines around her mouth, from frowning more than laughing these last few years. My mind tried to warn me, tried to replay the last fight we'd had. The way Megan's face had gone red, her eyes wild as she shouted about the $40,000 loan I wouldn't give her for some vague business launch. The way her husband, Chase, had stood behind her, arms crossed, saying nothing but letting his presence loom like a threat. "You're sitting on a paid-off house and retirement accounts," she'd screamed. "Dad left you comfortable, and you're just guarding it like some dragon while we drown." "I'm your daughter. I'm your mother," I'd said quietly back then. "Not your bank." The memory tasted bitter. I pushed it away and stood up. I told myself we were getting a second chance. Maybe I had been too strict. Maybe I'd let fear of being used turn me into someone cold. By 6 o'clock, I was showered and dressed in a navy blouse my late husband, Tom, had loved on me. I put on a little lipstick, dug my keys from the ceramic bowl by the front door, and stepped into my quiet garage. The air smelled like dust, motor oil, and the faint scent of sage that blows in from the mesa when the wind hits right. My 2018 Subaru Outback sat in the middle, solid and reliable, just like me. Tom had insisted on it before he passed. "I want you in something safe, Helen. Something that'll take a hit and keep you breathing." I patted the dashboard like I always do, slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The starter cranked strong, but the engine didn't catch. I frowned and tried again. The cabin lights were bright, the radio flickered on, and the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. The battery was fine. The fuel gauge read half a tank. Again, crank, crank, crank. No ignition. "Come on, sweetheart," I muttered, the nurse in me bargaining with a machine like it was a stubborn patient. "Not tonight. Not tonight." I popped the hood, climbed out, and stared at the maze of hoses and metal like it might start speaking English. I can intubate a grown man in a moving ambulance, but I can't tell a fuel pump from a flux capacitor. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Megan." "Mom. Where are you? Don't be late." Another buzz. "Megan. The food's almost done. Hurry up, please." I felt the old familiar guilt wrap around my ribs. I didn't want to disappoint her. Not this time. Not when we were finally talking. I called roadside assistance with trembling fingers and paced the driveway, while the dispatcher promised a tow truck within 30 minutes. The sky, over the mesas, had gone from pink to deep blue, with one star peeking through. The air had that February bite that sneaks up the sleeves of your jacket. By the time the tow truck's amber lights turned onto my street, my daughter had texted 4 more times, each one shorter, more insistent. "Mom, we're waiting. The food is getting cold. Please hurry." I typed out, "Car trouble. Getting it towed. I'll get there as soon as I can." Then deleted it. Then typed it again. Deleted it again. The message felt like an excuse, even though it was true. The tow driver, a heavy-set guy with kind eyes and a Roy patch on his shirt, loaded my Subaru and waved me into the cab. "Where are we headed, ma'am?" "There's a small shop over on Southern," I said. "Delgado Auto. You know it?" Roy nodded. "Frank's place?" "Yeah. He's good people. If anyone can get you back on the road tonight, it's him." "I hope so," I said, looking at my glowing phone screen. "My family's expecting me." As we pulled away from my little house, my mind circled one thought, over and over, like the wheels under us. Maybe this is the night we fix things. Maybe this is the last night I have to eat alone. I didn't know yet that the reason my car wouldn't start had just saved my life. To understand how I ended up in a fluorescent-lit garage staring at my own death, you need to know a little about my daughter. Megan was the kind of baby who clung to me like a koala. Tom used to laugh and call her Velcro. If I so much as walked to the bathroom without her, she'd wail like the world was ending. But when strangers picked her up, she'd go quiet and wary, studying them with serious brown eyes she got from her father. By middle school in Albuquerque, she'd turned that watchfulness into charm. Teachers adored her. She was smart, too smart. Sometimes she figured out early that a tilted head and a well-timed, "I'm sorry, I didn't understand the assignment," could squeeze extra days out of people. Tom used to say, "She's going to be a lawyer or a politician, mark my words." He said it with pride. I heard something else. The way she always knew which adult to play, which friend to flatter, and which rule to bend without quite breaking. We weren't rich, not by any stretch. I worked nights at the emergency department. Tom worked maintenance at the university. We had one car, packed lunches, and a modest 3-bedroom house in Rio Rancho that we bought when the market dipped. What we did have was stability, steady paychecks, a little 401, some savings, and more love than Megan seemed to know what to do with. She wanted bigger. Always bigger. In high school, it was the right clothes and the right phone. If I said we couldn't afford something, she'd sulk for days. Not tantrums. She was past that age. Just a cold, withdrawn silence that was somehow worse. When Tom died sudden heart attack on a hot August afternoon, I thought grief might soften her. It did, for about 2 months. We clung to each other, both of us stunned that the bed was half empty, and Tom's coffee mug sat by the sink like it was waiting for him to come back. But as the life insurance check cleared and the bills got paid, something in Megan's eyes hardened. "Did Dad have more?" she asked one night, out of nowhere, while we ate red chile enchiladas at the kitchen table. "Like other policies? Investments?" I stared at her, fork halfway to my mouth. "Why?" She shrugged, chasing beans around her plate. "Just wondering. I mean, he worked his whole life. I hope it wasn't just for this being our paid-off house, our emergency fund, and the cushion that kept us from drowning when a tire blew or a paycheck was late." I told myself she was just processing things in her own way. That asking about money was a teenager's clumsy way of talking about security, about fear. But as the years went on, the questions came more often. How much was in my retirement account? Had I thought about downsizing? Why didn't I let the money work instead of letting it sit? Megan went to community college, then left halfway through her associate's degree to move in with Chase, a smooth-talking guy with big smiles and bigger ideas. He always had a new plan: real estate marketing, online coaching, a coffee truck. None of them lasted longer than a year. They married in a small ceremony at a park on the west side. Tom's absence sat beside me, like a solid thing. Megan wore white, Chase wore cowboy boots, and during the vows, my daughter promised loyalty, honesty, and partnership. I believed her. I wanted to. The first big ask came 2 years later. "Mom, it's just a bridge loan," she said, walking circles in my living room. Phone clutched in one hand, a folder of badly printed spreadsheets in the other. "We've got this opportunity, but we need to move fast, or someone else will snatch it." "What opportunity?" I asked. She and Chase had found a turnkey investment in some vacation rental startup on the coast. "If they got in now," she said, "they could double their money in a year. Triple, maybe." Words like passive income and cash flow rolled off her tongue like she'd swallowed a brochure. "How much?" I asked quietly, already feeling my stomach knot. "40,000, she said. Like it was nothing. Like we were discussing $40. "Just until it stabilizes. We'll pay you back with interest." "Mom." "No," I said. It came out steadier than I felt. "That's too much. And I don't invest in things I don't understand." Her face snapped from charming to furious, so fast it made my head spin. "You don't invest in anything," she spat. "You just sit on money like a vulture. Dad left you comfortable, and you'd rather die with it than help your own daughter." I'd cared for accident victims whose families stood in hallways praying for one more minute with them. I'd watched people die alone because no one had come. I'd seen what truly desperate looked like. This wasn't that. This was entitlement, plain and simple. "Megan," I said, keeping my voice in that calm register I used with combative patience, "I am not obligated to fund your risks. If you and Chase have a solid plan, take it to a bank, a credit union. Show them your projections." Her eyes filled with tears, but there was no softness in them. Just rage. "You are obligated," she said. "I'm your only child. Everything you have is going to be mine anyway. What difference does it make if you give some of it now, when I actually need it?" That sentence cut deeper than she knew. "That money isn't just numbers on a page," I said. "It's the nights I spent breaking my back in the ER. It's the Christmas shifts, the double shifts, The times I handed your father my entire paycheck and told him to pay whatever was due. It's our security. My security. I will not sign it away because you and your husband want to play entrepreneurs." She slammed her palm on the coffee table, making my tea slosh. "You're unbelievable." Chase, who'd been leaning in the doorway, finally spoke. "Come on, Meg," he drawled. "She's made her choice. She'd rather have her savings than her daughter." They left. The front door rattled in its frame from the force of Megan's slam. For weeks, the only sign she was alive was a few stiff text messages about mail and a forgotten sweater. Then the texts stopped too. 3 months of silence. 3 months of watching their lives through social media, smiling selfies in Scottsdale. Business brainstorming. In hotel lobbies. Selfies with captions like, "Grind now. Shine later." I told myself she'd come around. That blood was thicker than resentment. That I'd get the chance to fix it. Which is why, when my phone rang that February evening and her name appeared, I didn't ask the questions I should have. I just said yes. Delgado Auto Repair sits in one of those squat cinderblock buildings on a side street off Southern Boulevard. You'd miss it if you didn't know to look. One battered sign. A row of dusty cars. Light spilling out of open bay doors. Roy dropped my Subaru in the cracked concrete lot and gave a quick blast of the tow truck's horn. A man in his late 60s wiped his hands on a rag and came out from under the lift. He had close-cropped gray hair, grease on his forearms, and the kind of crow's feet you get from squinting at sun and metal your whole life. "Evening," he said. "You must be the one with the Outback." "That's me," I said. "Helen Porter." "I'm Frank," he replied. "Roy says she cranks but won't start." "Exactly," I said. "She was fine yesterday." Frank nodded, almost like he'd expected that answer. "Keys?" "Keys?" I handed them over. He slid into the driver's seat, tried the ignition himself, and listened with his head tilted slightly and eyes half closed. Then, he popped the hood and motioned for me to follow. The night air had dropped colder. The smell of gasoline, rubber, and hot metal hung in the space under the bright shop lights. Frank leaned over the open engine bay, flashlight between his teeth, hands moving with practiced efficiency. I stood back, trying not to hover. But every minute that ticked by made my phone feel heavier in my pocket. It buzzed again. "Megan." "Mom. Please tell me you're on your way." Another vibration. "Megan. Chase is getting annoyed. Don't make this weird, okay?" The words prickled under my skin. I typed with shaking thumbs. "Car trouble. At the shop. I'll let you know." Then, hit send before I could chicken out. Frank was tracing a line along the inside of the engine bay when I saw it happen. His shoulders stiffened. The flashlight beam froze. He cursed softly around it, pulled it from his mouth, and stepped back like someone had shoved him. "Mrs. Porter," he said, voice low and strange. "Come here a second." My stomach tightened. I stepped closer, the smell of oil hitting my nose harder now. He pointed the beam at a thin metal line running along the frame. "See that?" he asked. At first, it just looked like a line. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw it. A razor-clean gap, no more than an inch long. The edges shone silver where the cut was fresh. "That's your brake line," Frank said. "Somebody cut it. Clean. That doesn't happen from wear and tear." The shop spun. Just a little. I put a hand on the fender to steady myself. "You mean it?" "Snapped?" I asked, even though I already knew what he meant. He shook his head. "No, ma'am. This is no snap." His voice turned flinty. "This is a blade. Somebody got under here with a tool and sliced it. And look here." He moved the beam toward a small cluster of wires near a sensor. "Whoever it was messed with your crankshaft position sensor too. Just enough so it throws a fault sometimes and keeps the engine from starting, but not permanently. If you'd kept trying, it might have kicked over. Eventually. Got you a few miles down the road. Then you'd hit the brakes." He didn't say the rest. He didn't have to. I saw it clearly. I-25 at 70 miles per hour. Brake pedal going all the way to the floor. Car not slowing. The median, the screaming, the spin. The kind of accidents I'd made. We seen rolled into the ER on gurneys. Metal and glass still clinging to broken bodies. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, and I jumped. Frank saw my hands shaking. "Are you okay, ma'am?" "No," I said honestly. "I don't think I am." He set the flashlight down and straightened, wiping his hands again, even though they didn't need it. A habit, maybe, when talking about bad news. "I've been doing this 40 years, he said. "I know the difference between a line that's rusted through and one that's been attacked. This was deliberate. If you'd gotten on the highway tonight, I don't like thinking about it." My heart hammered so hard it felt like it was echoing in my ears. Could it be? "Kids?" I asked weakly. "Some stupid prank?" He shook his head. "Kids slash tires. They don't lie under a car and neatly cut a brake line and just barely loosen a sensor. This took time, tools, knowledge, and whoever did it knew your car sits in a garage. That they had privacy. 2. My mind rifled through possibilities like a deck of cards. Neighbors? Strangers? Then, one image pushed everything else aside. My daughter standing in my kitchen 3 months ago, eyes blazing as she said, "Everything you have is going to me anyway. What difference does it make if you give some of it now?" The air felt thinner. Frank watched my face, his expression softening just a little. "Do you know anyone who would want to hurt you?" I should have said no. That would have been the normal answer, the safe answer. But the word caught in my throat. I don't know," I said slowly. Not like that." My phone buzzed again. I forced myself to look. "Megan. What kind of car trouble? Can you rent something? This dinner is important." The words landed differently. Now. Urgent. Pressing. Not like she was worried about me missing dinner, but like she was worried about a schedule slipping. A plan going sideways. "Frank," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. "Can you document this? Photos. A written note. Everything." He nodded immediately. "Already on it. I'm going to call the sheriff too. This is criminal, Mrs. Porter. It's not just a mechanical issue." I took a breath and forced myself to answer Megan. "The mechanic says it's serious. Can't drive it. I won't make it tonight. We'll reschedule." The reply came almost instantly. "Megan. Are you serious? After everything I cooked? Can you at least Uber?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For the first time in 62 years, I looked at my only child's words and wondered if they might be the last ones I ever got from her, if things had gone according to plan. "I'm tired," I typed. "I'm shaken up. I'm going home. We'll talk later." Then I put the phone face down on the counter. Frank came back in from under the lift with a stack of printed photos and a clipboard. His hands still trembled faintly. "Mrs. Porter," he said, meeting my eyes. "Whoever did this wanted you dead. You need to think real hard about who has a key to your place." For the first time, the image of Megan at 14 flashed through my mind. Me handing her a little brass key on a pink keychain. "This is so you can always come home," I'd told her then. Now, 20 years later, I realized that same key might be the reason I almost never came home again. If you've ever had to question whether your own family would protect you or profit from you, stay with me. Because what I did next is the only reason I'm alive to tell you this story. Roy had already gone on his next call, so Frank called me a rideshare while he finished up with the sheriff's deputy. They took statements, shook their heads, and promised to file a report. I've worked with enough cops in the ER to know what that means when there's no body on a gurney. "It's serious," the deputy said, tapping his pen on the clipboard. "But without a suspect or camera footage, it's going to be hard to prove who did it." "Hard doesn't mean impossible," I said. The nurse in me was gone. The woman who'd spent her life documenting every medication, every wound, every vital sign. She was awake. The deputy gave Frank a card, gave me another sympathetic smile, and left. My rideshare was a dented Corolla with a pine tree air freshener that somehow made it smell worse. The driver, a teenage boy with headphones on, asked, "Where to?" without looking at me. I gave my address. As we pulled out of the lot, I looked back at my Subaru. Up on the lift, its underbelly exposed like an operating table patient. My phone buzzed twice more. I didn't look. I watched the city blur by. Instead, the flicker of neon from taco shops, the glow of gas stations, and the silhouettes of the mountains turning black against the sky. My house looked unchanged when we pulled up. Same beige stucco. Same little patch of gravel with the stubborn yucca plant Tom had insisted on planting. "You want me to wait?" the driver asked. "No," I said. As his taillights disappeared, the silence settled on my block. A porch light flicked on 2 houses down. A dog barked once, then went quiet. Somewhere, a television droned behind closed curtains. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside. The familiar smell of lemon cleaner and old books wrapped around me. My late husband's jacket still hung on the hook by the door, like he might walk in and grab it any minute. I walked through the living room, touching things as I passed. The photo wall of Megan's school pictures. Tom's fishing rod is in the corner. The ugly green recliner. Megan always complained about, "Mom, it looks like a swamp monster," but that I refused to get rid of because it had molded to my shape over years of nights after work. I thought about someone standing in here, without my permission, moving through my things, walking down the hallway, toward my bedroom, toward the little bowl where my car keys always sat. Had Megan still had that spare key? I went to my bedroom and opened the top drawer of my dresser. Inside, under a folded sweater, was the small jewelry box where I kept the duplicate. Except, when I lifted the lid, the little hook was empty. The spare key was gone. Megan had borrowed it once, years ago, and never returned it. We'd argued. I'd forgotten, and life had moved on. I'd assumed it was lost in some purse or at the bottom of a drawer at her apartment in Albuquerque. Now I realized she might have known exactly where it was all along. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the mattress sighing under me. My mind split in two. The mother part wanted to deny, to rationalize. Maybe she'd misplaced it. Maybe someone else, some stranger, had broken in. The nurse part, the one trained to look at evidence without flinching, laid out the facts, like chart notes. Brake line cut cleanly. Sensor tampered with intentionally. Car kept in enclosed garage. Side door latch a little wobbly since the fall. Spare key missing. Daughter resentful of money. Dinner invitation with rigid timing. Repeated hurry texts. Put together, it painted one picture. And it was one I didn't want to see. The doorbell rang. I jumped so hard, my heart hurt. When I looked through the peephole, I exhaled. On my front step stood Frank, mechanic, holding a manila envelope. Behind him, a late model pickup idled at the curb. I opened the door. "Frank, everything okay?" He nodded and held up the envelope. "Brought you copies. Photos of the brake line, sensor, and my written statement. Figured you shouldn't have to wait until sang morning." His kindness nearly undid me. "Thank you," I said. "You didn't have to do that." He shrugged. "My wife used to say I never know when to clock out." His eyes softened. "She passed 10 years ago. Car accident, actually. Not like this," he added quickly. The other driver fell asleep. "But I don't play around with cars, trying to kill people. Not when I can help it." I stepped back. "You want to come in? I have coffee. It's not good, but it's hot." He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." For a minute. In the kitchen, he sat at the table while I put on a pot. The familiar motions steadied me. Fill the kettle. Scoop the grounds. Set the mugs. "You live alone?" he asked, glancing toward the family photos on the wall. I followed his gaze. Megan at 6, missing front teeth. Megan at 16, in a prom dress. Megan, at 28, in a simple white wedding gown, Chase's arm around her, his smile a little too wide. I do now, I said. My husband passed. My daughter. She has her own life. He studied my face for a beat, but he didn't push. Do you have any neighbors you trust? The kettle whistled. I poured water and brought him a mug. Mrs. Gutierrez across the street, I said slowly. But she's in her 70s and hard of hearing. Why? Frank wrapped his hands around the coffee like it was something precious. Because whoever did that to your car knows where you live. They know your schedule. They might think the plan failed, or they might think you just got delayed. You think they'll try again? I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer right away. He blew on his coffee, took a sip, and then looked at me. I think people who are desperate enough to crawl under a car to cut brake lines don't give up. Just because they hit one bump, he said quietly. Especially if there's money involved. I thought about Megan's last words during our fight. What difference does it make if you give some of it now when I actually need it? Money. I thought about the online posts I'd seen. The financial freedom quotes. And the bragging about taking risks. Desperation wears a lot of outfits. Sometimes it looks like poverty. Sometimes it wears manicured nails and a designer knockoff handbag. Frank finished his coffee and stood. You want me to walk the place with you? Check the doors, windows, that kind of thing? I almost said no. Pride is a stubborn thing, even when fear is gnawing at your bones. But then I thought about my car up on that lift, its veins cut open. Yes, I said. Please. We walked the house together. The front and back doors were solid, with deadbolts new enough. Windows latched. The weak point was exactly where Frank suspected, the side door to the garage. The latch plate was slightly bent, like it had been forced at some point. Not enough to break it. Just enough to make it easier the next time. Could have been done with a ride. Screwdriver, he said. Quick, quiet. In, out. I held the frame where the paint was scuffed. A metallic scraping sound flashed in my mind 2 nights ago, about 2 in the morning, when I'd woken briefly and heard something outside. I'd written it off as the wind rattling the garbage cans. Now I wondered if it had been my daughter's husband easing my garage door shut after cutting my brake line. Frank straightened. I know a locksmith. Good one. He owes me a favor. I can have him here tomorrow. Frank. I can have him here tomorrow. I exhaled slowly. Do you always rescue your customers like this? He smiled. The first real one I'd seen on his face. Only the stubborn ones who forget they're allowed to ask for help. He left me with the envelope. A plan to have the locks changed, and one more piece of advice. Mrs. Porter, he said at the door, looking more serious than ever. If you have any reason at all to suspect someone specific, get ahead of them. Talk to a lawyer. Get your house and your accounts protected. People do crazy things when they think a big payday is coming. After he drove away, I sat at my kitchen table. The envelope in front of me, like it contained a diagnosis. In a way, it did. I pulled out a pen and a yellow notepad from the drawer. Old habits die hard. I wrote at the top, February 23rd, 7:52 p.m. Attempted sabotage of vehicle, possible attempted homicide. Underneath, I began to list evidence, dates, names, questions. I'd spent decades in emergency rooms, scribbling notes between patients, documenting everything in case lawyers came calling. Now, for the first time, I was building a chart on my own life, and the primary suspect was my only child. Somewhere across town, Megan was probably scraping plates into the trash, furious that I hadn't shown up. She thought she knew me. Thought I'd roll over, apologize, and hand her whatever she wanted if she just twisted harder. What she'd forgotten is that I'd spent my entire adult life in the middle of other people's worst days, and I knew exactly how to survive. Them. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house and every gust of wind against the stucco made my muscles tense. My phone lit up on the nightstand. Again and again. Texts from Megan. Ranging from annoyed, to concerned, to guilt-tripping. We made all this food, Mom. I thought you wanted to make things right. Are you really choosing a car over your family? I didn't reply. At 3 in the morning, I finally put the phone in the kitchen drawer and closed it. The next day, the locksmith came. Frank had sent him. A wiry man with tattooed forearms changed every lock in my house, including the side garage door. He installed a deadbolt on that one, too. When he handed me the new keys, they felt heavier than the old ones. These are high-security cylinders, he said. Hard to pick, and no one can duplicate them without your authorization. It was a small layer of armor, but it helped. The second layer came that afternoon when I sat in a leather chair across from a woman in a navy suit at a law office off Coors Boulevard. "All right, Mrs. Porter," she said, sliding a legal pad toward her. "Tell me what's going on." Her name was Allison Lee, estate attorney. Mid-40s, sharp eyes. Frank's cousin, it turned out. New Mexico is big on a map, but in real life, it's one of those places where everyone knows someone who knows someone. I told her everything, starting with the dinner invitation, ending with the brake line photos. I didn't cry. I'd done plenty of that in the shower that morning. Here, I was clinical, precise. Allison listened without interrupting, pen moving occasionally but eyes mostly on me. When I finished, she sat back, laced her fingers together, and blew out a breath. "This is ugly," she said. "But, sadly, not unheard of." I swallowed. "You've seen this before?" She nodded. "More than I'd like to. Elder financial abuse, inheritance schemes, children who think they're entitled to their parents' assets now, not someday. I've seen cases where they forged signatures, drained accounts, and pressured their parents to sign over deeds." She looked at the photos of my brake line, her mouth tightening. "I've never personally had a case where they cut brake lines. Lucky me," I thought, bitterly. "What are my options?" I asked. "Legally. First," she said, "we protect your estate. You told me Megan is currently the sole beneficiary of your will." I nodded, shame prickling. "We wrote it after Tom died. It all goes to her. The house, the accounts, everything." "Not anymore," Allison said, matter-of-factly. "If you believe she tried to kill you, to get to that inheritance faster, the last thing you should do is leave things as they are. There's also something else to consider." She pulled a thin book from her shelf. New Mexico, like many states, has what's commonly called a slayer statute. It says if someone is convicted of intentionally killing or attempting to kill the person they're supposed to inherit from, they're treated as if they predeceased that person. In other words, they don't get a dime. I let that sink in. So if I report this, and there's enough evidence, and she's convicted, she's legally cut off anyway. "Correct," Allison said. "But criminal cases take time, and you deserve peace of mind now, regardless of what a jury decides later. What are you suggesting?" She flipped to a fresh page, her handwriting quick and neat. "We draft a new will. You can leave your estate to whomever you choose, a charity, a friend, or a trust. You can even leave your daughter a token amount, like $1, with a statement explaining why, to make your intentions crystal clear and harder to challenge." Wouldn't that be cruel? The mom part of me whispered it before the rest could shut her up. Allison's gaze softened, but her voice stayed firm. "Mrs. Porter, cruelty is cutting your mother's brake line so you can inherit her house. Protecting yourself is not cruelty. It's survival." I thought about the house, about Tom, painting the living room walls that soft sage green, about Megan taking her first steps down the hallway, that little squeal she made when she let go of my fingers, about Christmas mornings and flu seasons and late-night arguments. I thought about Megan standing in that same living room 3 months ago, telling me what I owed her. All right, I said. What does a new will look like? We spent the next hour building a new future. It felt surreal, talking about my own death, in sterile, practical terms. I want part of it to go to the pediatric wing at the hospital, I said. Those kids, they never had a chance to build savings. They deserve something. Allison nodded. We can leave a percentage to the Children's Hospital Foundation. And the rest. I hesitated. The image that popped into my mind wasn't Megan's face. It was Frank's, serious, under the shop lights. It was Mrs. Gutierrez, bringing me tamales every Megan Christmas since Tom died. It was the nurse scholarships at the community college. The rest to be split between the foundation and a scholarship for nursing students, I said. Local ones. Kids who actually work for things. If there's a person I want to leave something to, I can add that later, right? Of course, Allison said. Wills can be amended. The important thing is, we remove your daughter, as primary heir, immediately. By the time I put my shaky signature on the last page, my hand ached. Allison notarized everything, made copies, and put the originals in a slim blue folder. I want you to store one copy in a safe place, she said. Safety deposit box, trusted friend. I'll keep another here. I tucked the folder into my bag like it was a life preserver. In a way, it was. Now, Allison added, about the criminal side. Have you formally made a report? I spoke with a deputy, I said. But it felt like they weren't taking it seriously. All right, she said briskly. I'll help you set up a meeting with a detective. Bring the photos, Frank's statement, and your notes. And one more thing. Do you have any security cameras? Just the cheap doorbell one Megan convinced me to buy last year, I said. Said it would modernize my home. How ironic, Allison murmured. I recommend installing cameras in your garage and any entry points. If your daughter or anyone else tries anything again, we want footage. Tries again. I repeated. The words, feeling heavy in my mouth. You really think she will? Thing. Allison didn't sugarcoat. People who escalate to attempted murder over money rarely wake up the next day and decide to take the high road. On my way home, I stopped at the bank and rented a small safety deposit box. The will copy went in alongside the deed to the house and the title to my car. Then I went to a big box store and did something my frugal self would have scolded me for 3 months ago. I bought a set of high-resolution security cameras. Back at home, I struggled with the mounts and cables, until a familiar pickup pulled into my driveway. Frank climbed out, eyes crinkling as he took in the mess of wires in my hands. You look like you're trying to do a quadruple bypass with a butter knife. I'm a nurse, not an electrician, I said, relieved laughter bubbling up. Are you any good with tech? Or am I doomed? Lucky for you, he said, rolling up his sleeves. My grandson thinks I'm his free IT support. I've learned a thing or two. We spent the next 2 hours turning my garage into something out of a true crime show. Cameras covering the car, the side door, and interior garage door. Each was connected to an app on my phone that pinged when motion was detected. As we worked, Frank told me about his late wife, about how he'd opened the shop with her help, and about the grandchildren he only saw every few months now. I told him about the ER, about Tom, and about Megan as a little girl. We didn't talk about brake lines. Not directly. But everything we didn't say hung in the spaces between drill buzzes and cable ties. When the last camera was installed, we stood in the driveway, looking at the house. The sky over the mountains glowed orange. You know, Frank said, most people who come through my shop, I fix their car. They forget my name in a week. You're not like most people. I could say the same about you, I replied. He nodded toward the envelope of photos I'd tucked under my arm. If you get any pushback from the cops, you call me. I'll testify. I'm not letting whoever did this pretend it was an accident. Later that night, alone in my living room, I opened the app and watched the live feed of my empty garage. The Subaru sat quietly, wounded but safe. The cameras labeled each angle: driveway, side, door, and interior. My phone buzzed. I almost didn't look, but habit won. Megan. Mom, are you done being dramatic yet? We just wanted dinner. I don't know what story you're telling yourself, but you're hurting me on purpose now. For the first time in my life. Her words didn't make me question my reality. They made me angry. I didn't answer. Not yet. If you've ever been made to feel crazy for noticing red flags in your own family, stick with me. Because the next move I made turned their entire plan upside down, and they never saw it coming. Saturday morning dawned, clear and cold. Sunlight poured into my bedroom, catching dust motes in the air. For the first time since the brake line revelation, I felt something like resolve instead of raw shock. The detective Allison had called for me. Detective Carter Hayes met me at the sheriff's office that afternoon. He was in his early 50s, with the weary look of someone who'd seen too many bad things and not enough justice. We sat in a small interview room that smelled faintly of coffee and old paint. I laid out everything on the table: photos, Frank's statement, my notes, the locksmith's invoice, and the printout of my new will. Hayes reviewed each piece carefully, lips pressed in a tight line. When he spoke, his voice was measured. Mrs. Porter, he said, I'm going to be straight with you. What happened to your car is serious. That's not vandalism. That's attempted vehicular homicide. If, quote, the words landed like a weight. I'd known it, deep down. But hearing it from someone in authority made the floor feel less steady. But, he continued, right now, all we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt is that someone did this. We don't yet have evidence tying it to a specific person. That's not there. You want direct proof, I said. Footage. Fingerprints. A confession. He nodded. Exactly. You mentioned your daughter, her financial issues, the fight, the dinner invitation, with rigid timing. These are strong circumstantial indicators. Put them together with the sabotage, and I can say, as a human being, that your theory makes sense. But a judge needs more than "makes sense" to sign off on an arrest warrant. So what do we do? I asked. Sit around and wait for them to try again. Hayes leaned back, studying me. Most people in your position are either in denial or ready to storm over and confront their kid, he said. You're unusually calm. With P and there. I won. I smiled without humor. I spent 35 years in rooms just like this one, detective. Different end of the hallway, same building. I watched mothers deny their sons could have stabbed anyone. Wives insist they're wife. Husbands weren't like that after they came in with broken jaws. Calm doesn't mean I'm not scared. It just means I know. Panic never saved anyone. He considered that, then nodded slowly. All right. You want to build a case, not just survive tonight. I want both, I said. Survive. And make sure they can't try again, with me or with anyone else. We spent the next hour going over possibilities: camera coverage, phone records, and financial tracing. Hayes promised to quietly look into Megan and Chase's debts, business registrations, and any life insurance policies with my name on them. When I left, I felt like I had an ally, not a savior, but a professional who took me seriously. That mattered. On the drive home, an idea formed. Dangerous, maybe, but controlled. If Megan and Chase thought I was still naive, still the lonely widowed mother desperate for reconciliation, they'd underestimate me. They already had, so I decided to let them. That evening, I texted Megan. I'm sorry I missed dinner. The car situation shook me up. I'd like to see you. Can we try again next week? She replied in under a minute. Megan. I guess. Chase is still annoyed. But we can do Friday. 7 p.m. Again. Don't flake this time. My jaw tightened at that last line. But I forced myself to answer lightly. I won't. I promise. The next day, Sunday, I added a new layer to the plan. I asked Frank if he could tow my Subaru back to my garage, without fixing the sabotage yet. It's not safe to drive, he reminded me. I know, I said. I'm not going to drive it. I just want it here. As bait. He looked at me. Something like respect in his eyes. You really are different from most people. On Monday, a security company installed additional cameras, one in the hallway and one pointed at my front door. I felt paranoid, but I also felt something else. Protected. Midweek, I dropped a little bit of information exactly where I wanted it. I called Megan. Hey honey, I said, keeping my tone chatty. I've been thinking about what you said a while ago. About the house being too big for me. Immediate interest sharpened her voice. Yeah? I've been talking to a real estate agent. I lied smoothly. She thinks I could get around $350,000 for it. Maybe more if I do a few upgrades. A beat of silence. That much? Apparently the market's decent, I said. I also met with a financial planner. We were talking about using some of the equity for one of those retirement communities. You know, the ones with a pool and activities. Might be nice to have people around. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. Could I have pushed it further, mentioned numbers, or teased the idea of cashing out retirement accounts? Sure. But I didn't want to oversell. People are always more believable when they scatter big decisions over several days. Wow, she said finally. That's big, Mom. We should talk about it Friday. Maybe Chase can help you look over the options. You don't want to get scammed. The irony stung. But I swallowed it. That'd be nice, I said. I'd appreciate that. After we hung up, I called Allison and told her what I'd said. Good, she said. Let Cass them stew on the idea of the house being converted into cash. Let them think they still have a chance with your money. That kind of hope makes people reckless. Reckless enough to come back to the scene of the crime, I said, hopefully with a camera pointed at them this time. She replied. Thursday night. As I checked the camera feeds one more time before bed, my doorbell rang. I checked the screen first, another new habit, and saw Frank standing on the porch with a six-pack of root beer and a tentative smile. I figured someone who almost died this week could use company, he said when I opened the door. And sugar. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear another human voice in my house until that moment. We sat on the couch, root beer bottles sweating on coasters. The TV played some old detective show in the background. Ironic and oddly comforting. You think they'll take the bait? Frank asked. I think, I said slowly, that if they really cut that line to get to my money, they won't be able to stand the idea of it slipping away into some retirement community and charities. People like that don't just let go, he agreed. We sat in companionable silence for a while. Then, quietly, he asked, Do you ever feel guilty for even thinking she did this? All the time, I wanted to say. Less with each day that passes, I answered instead. When she was little, if someone had told me she'd grow up to see me as a bank, instead of a mother, I would have laughed. But we don't get to choose who our kids become. We only get to choose what we let them do to us. Frank nodded, eyes on the TV but mind clearly elsewhere. I've got a son, he said. Lives in Phoenix. Calls when he needs something. Money, mostly. I always send it. Even when I shouldn't. Hearing you. Maybe I've been doing him a bigger disservice than I realized. That's the worst part, I said. Knowing that love and enabling can look so similar. He looked at me then. Really looked. And I felt something shift. It wasn't romantic. Not in some sudden movie way. It was quieter than that. A recognition. Two people on opposite sides of the same wound. Friday morning dawned bright. My Subaru sat in the garage, repaired enough to look drivable, but with the brake lines still visibly cut on camera. The rental car I'd been using all week was parked at the curb. Keys in my pocket. I checked every camera angle twice, tested the motion notifications, reviewed the plan with Hayes over the phone. "You go to dinner," he said. "Be normal. Let them talk. Do not confront them about the car or the will. Affirm that you're thinking about selling. When you're on your way home, text me. We'll have a patrol car swing by your street for the next few nights, just in case they come sooner than we expect." "You really think they'll be that fast? If they're as deep in debt as we're finding," Hayes said grimly. "They're already late on bills. Time is money, and you're the paycheck they thought they had lined up." I ended the call and looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror. I didn't look like bait. I looked like a slightly tired, slightly sad, deeply determined woman in a clean blouse and pressed slacks. "Let's see what you're really capable of, Megan," I whispered to the empty house. Megan's house sat in a newer development on the west side of Albuquerque, all beige, stucco, and identical driveways. It was the kind of neighborhood with HOA rules about lawn ornaments and trash can placement. When I pulled up at 6:58 p.m., every light in their house was on. The porch light, the living room, and even the kitchen window glowed. The door opened before I could knock. Megan stood there, in a fitted sweater and jeans, her dark hair pulled back, makeup carefully done. She smelled like perfume and grilled meat. "Right on time," she said, a little too brightly. "Come in. Factoring 24. Factoring 24. I stepped inside. The house looked like something out of a catalog. Clean lines, neutral colors, expensive-looking throw pillows. No trace of chaos. No toys. No clutter. Just curated surfaces. Chase appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He flashed that same salesman smile he'd had since I met him. "Hey, Helen," he said. "Good to see you." He hugged me. His arms were strong and firm, the kind of hug that could feel like comfort or control, depending on what you knew. "You too," I lied. Dinner was, objectively, delicious. Megan had always been a good cook when she wanted to be. Chile verde, arroz, and fresh tortillas. "You went to a lot of trouble," I said. Genuinely this time. She shrugged modestly. "I wanted it to be special. A new start, you know." We sat, said a perfunctory grace, Chase's idea, always more about image than faith, and began to eat. For the first 15 minutes, conversation stayed light. Work, weather, a new restaurant, opening downtown. Then, like a script they'd rehearsed, they pivoted. "So, Megan," said carefully casual, "you mentioned something about selling the house." I speared a piece of pork with my fork, forcing my hand not to tremble. "Just thinking," I said. "It's a lot of space for one person. And the yard is too much." Chase leaned forward, elbows on the table in a way he probably thought looked engaged and caring. "You shouldn't rush into anything big like that," he said. "There are tax implications, capital gains. We'd hate to see you get taken advantage of." The way he said, "we," made my skin crawl. "I've been meeting with a planner," I said lightly, "and an attorney. They're helping me walk through it." Both their faces shifted at that word. "Attorney." End quote. Megan's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What attorney?" she asked. "A woman named Allison Lee," I said, taking a sip of water. "She helped me redo some paperwork. You know, wills, beneficiaries, that kind of thing. Your father always meant to get to it, but—" I let my voice trail off. Chase's jaw clenched for a fraction of a second before he forced it into a smile. "It's good you're, staying on top of that stuff," he said. "So, what did you decide?" "About what?" "The will," Megan said. Her tone was still light, but there was an edge under it now. "We had talked before about, you know, everything going to me. Since there's no one else. Yes, I said. We did talk about that. The silence stretched. I let it. In the end, I said, I, I, decided to leave most of it to causes your dad and I cared about. The children's hospital. A nursing scholarship. Things like that. Megan's chair scraped the tile as she sat back abruptly. What? What? I shrugged like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. You have your own life, Megan. Your own earning potential. We raised you to be independent. I don't want you waiting on my death to feel secure. It was as close as I'd come to saying it outright. Chase's face had gone very still. Megan's eyes shone, whether from anger or tears. I couldn't tell yet. So that's it? She asked, voice tight. I get nothing? I didn't say that, I replied. There's a small amount set aside for you. Enough to help. But the house, the bulk of the savings, they're going elsewhere. Chase's mask slipped, just for a second. Don't you think that's a little unfair? He snapped. After everything we've done for you? I raised my eyebrows. Everything you've done for me? Color flooded his cheeks. We've invited you into our home. Tried to include you. Tried to help you make smart decisions. And you repay that by cutting us out? Do you have any idea how that makes us look? Something about that phrasing made my stomach twist. This wasn't about loss. It was about image, about status, about whatever fantasy they'd spun, about their future wealth. It's not about how it looks, I said. It's about what's right. Megan pushed her plate away. Appetite, clearly gone. Right? She repeated. You think it's right to leave your only child with scraps, while strangers get the life you promised? I never promised you my death, Megan, I said, my voice finally sharpening. I promised you love, support, a childhood where you always had food and clothes and a safe place to sleep. You got that. That was my duty. My money after that is my decision. Her eyes filled, but there was no softness in them. Just a fury that scared me more than the brake line. You're unbelievable, she whispered. You would rather give everything to kids. You don't know than to your own daughter. I thought about the kids I had known. The ones left alone in hospital beds while social workers tried to find them a place. The ones whose parents never showed. They need it more, I said quietly. She stood abruptly. I need some air. She walked out onto the back patio, sliding the glass door shut with more force than necessary. Through the glass, I saw her pacing, phone in hand, texting furiously. Chase watched her go, then turned back to me, his face smoothing into something almost sympathetic. She'll come around, he said. She's just shocked. I'm sure, I said. We finished the meal in stiff small talk. When I finally stood to leave, Megan had composed herself enough to hug me at the door. Her arms were stiff around me, her cheek cool against mine. Drive safe, Mom, she murmured. Text me when you get home, okay? There it was. The line that, a week ago, would have sounded like concern. Now it sounded like anticipation. I will, I said. And, Megan? She pulled back slightly, eyes wary. Yeah? I am not changing my mind, I said. About the will. About the house. So, if that's what all this is about. Save your energy. When, quote, for a split second, something ugly flashed across her face. Then, it was gone, replaced by the wounded daughter again. I just wanted dinner with my mom, she said. I walked to my car, feeling their eyes on my back. Once I was around the corner, I pulled over, hands shaking only a little now. I texted Hayes. Dinner done. Told them about the new will and possible house sale. Their faces were something. I'm on my way home. He replied almost immediately. We'll have a unit swing by your street every hour tonight. Cameras rolling? I opened the app. Every angle of my garage showed in crisp black and white. My Subaru sat where we'd left it. Cameras rolling, I replied. That night, I slept in the guest room at the back of the house. Phone on the nightstand. Volume turned up. Frank had insisted on parking his truck in my driveway for visibility. The patrol car's headlights swept past my window twice between midnight and 2 a.m. At 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Garage side door. The notification read. My heart hammered as I opened the app with clumsy fingers. The camera showed the side door, the deadbolt lock, the frame. The knob turned slowly. The door opened. A figure slipped inside. Hood pulled up, moving like they'd done it before. They closed the door behind them carefully, then turned toward the car, toolbox in hand. My breath caught. Even in grainy infrared, I recognized the way his shoulders moved. Chase. He set the box down, opened it, and took out a small flashlight and a pair of pliers. He crouched by the Subaru, reaching under. The camera caught his face in profile when he glanced up once, eyes scanning the garage. I hit the call button, for Hayes with one hand, and dialed 911 with the other. Detective, I whispered when he answered. He's here. In my garage. Chase. The cameras have him. Stay in your room, Hayes said. Lock the door. Units are 2 minutes out. On the 911 line, my voice sounded eerily calm to my own ears as I gave my address. There's a man in my garage, breaking in. He's tampering with my vehicle. The sheriff's office is already en route. 1. There's a morning 2. Is he armed? The operator asked. I don't know, I said, watching Chase move under the car again. But he's already tried to kill me once. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. On the camera feed, Chase froze, head lifting like a startled animal's. He grabbed his toolbox, bolted for the side door, and slipped out. He didn't know it. But every second of his face, his movements, and his tools were now stored in 3 separate cloud backups and downloading to my phone. The patrol car's headlights washed over my front windows. Doors slammed, shouted, commands broke the night. I stayed in my locked room until Hayes himself knocked, announced, Detective Hayes, and waited for me to open. His face was lit with a grim satisfaction I recognized from my own when a risky procedure went right. We got him running down the side yard, he said, tools in hand. He swears he was just checking on your car as a favor. And the first time? I asked. We'll get to that, he said, eyes flicking to my phone. But this time, we've got him on breaking and entering, attempted criminal damage, and likely attempted homicide, once we tie it to the original sabotage. If you're still listening at this point, I promise you, the story isn't over yet. Asterisk. Catching him in my garage was just the beginning, because what my daughter did when her husband was arrested showed me exactly who she really was. Asterisk. The next 48 hours blurred into a parade of statements, signatures, and sterile rooms. At the station, I watched from a distance as they walked Chase past in handcuffs. Gone was the easy charm, the confident swagger. He looked smaller somehow. Megan called me 3 times that morning. I let every call go to voicemail. Her messages started panicked and quickly went to furious. Mom, what did you do? They said Chase was caught on your property. Are you insane? You're ruining our lives. I sat in my kitchen, hands around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold, and listened to them all. Hayes later told me Chase's first instinct was to lie, then minimize. He claimed he'd heard about the car trouble and was just checking the brake line as a mechanic favor. When Hayes pointed out, we had footage of him breaking a newly installed lock at 3 a.m. He stammered, backpedaled, and requested a lawyer. The lawyer, a tired-looking public defender, advised him to say nothing. That didn't stop him from trying to say plenty to me. Hayes asked if I was willing to sit in on a controlled conversation, a monitored phone call from Chase to Megan, designed to capture anything incriminating. I agreed. They set me in a small room with a speaker. A red light glowed on the console. I could hear the faint echo of the jail on. Chase's end voices, metal doors, a distant TV. "Megan, it's me," he said, when she answered. "What is happening?" she hissed. "The cops came to the house and tore everything apart. They said you tried to break into my mother's garage? You said she'd be asleep," he snapped. "And he didn't tell me she installed cameras or changed the locks. You told me she was stubborn, not paranoid." My chest tightened. It was one thing to suspect, another to hear it. "This is your mess too," he continued. "You're the one who said we were screwed if we didn't get that house. That we needed her gone before she blew it on retirement communities and charities." On the recording, there was a sharp inhale from Megan's side. "Don't say that," she said in a harsh whisper. "They're listening. They already have the brake line photos," he said bitterly. "They know it wasn't an accident. And now they've got me on tape in the garage. You think they're going to believe you were at home knitting while I did all this to help us out of the goodness of my heart?" Silence crackled. "That wasn't the plan," Megan said finally, voice low. "You were supposed to make it look like the line wore through. An accident. We'd cry. We'd grieve. We'd inherit. And no one would question anything. You screwed it up." My stomach rolled. Even the detective on the other side of the glass raised his eyebrows. We had just crossed from suspicion into confession. "You think this is all on me?" Chase demanded. "Who suggested using the spare key? Who sat there, calculating how much your mother's house was worth, and how much was in her accounts? Who said, 'Either she helps us now, or we take what's going to be mine anyway'?" The line went quiet. Then Megan said something. "I will hear in my nightmares until the day I die." "I didn't say kill her," she whispered. "I said, rush the timeline." Hayes stopped the recording there, jaw tight. "That's enough," he said. It was more than enough. It was felony level enough. By Monday, they had both been arrested. Charges: conspiracy to commit homicide, attempted homicide, burglary, and criminal damage. It was a long list. Allison sat beside me in the DA's office as they discussed plea deals and potential sentences. My head spun with legal terms. Minimums, maximums, probation possibilities. "We could take this to trial," the prosecutor said. "With the recording, the footage, and the mechanic's testimony, I'm confident we'd get a conviction. But that means a long process. Months, maybe more than a year. Appeals, hearings. You would have to testify, Mrs. Porter." Multiple times, I thought, about telling a room full of strangers that my child thought my death was a manageable business risk. "What's the alternative?" I asked. "Plea," the prosecutor said. "They plead guilty to a lesser charge assault, with intent to commit a violent felony and conspiracy. They each serve time. It's shorter than a maximum sentence, but it's guaranteed. No dragging you through court, again and again." "How long?" I asked. 8 to 10 years recommended," she said. "Possibility of parole after 6. We can argue for longer. But that's the ballpark. A decade." I pictured Megan at 40. Getting out of prison. I'd be in my 70s, if I were still around. "I need to think," I said. At home, I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd bandaged Megan's scraped knees, where I'd graded her homework, and where she'd screamed at me about the loan. Frank came over with takeout burritos. He didn't talk much. He just sat across from me and waited. "You ever watch a kid grow up and realize you don't know them at all?" I asked quietly. "Every time my grandson comes over and shows me some new app," he said, trying to joke, then sobered. "Yeah. My son isn't a criminal, but he's not the man I thought he'd be. That's its own kind of grief." "If I agree to the deal," I said, "she spends less time in prison than she would if we went to trial." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe a jury gets swayed by tears and stories about stress and poor choices." And she walks out with probation. You've seen this from the medical side. You know, it's not always proportional. You know, I did know that. I'd seen drunk drivers get slaps on the wrist. I'd seen domestic abusers charm their way into second chances with judges who wanted to believe the best. What do you want? He asked gently. I wanted my daughter back. The one who'd fallen asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. The teenager who'd cried over her first breakup. The young woman who'd called me in the middle of the night to ask how to make Tom's favorite soup. But that girl was gone. Maybe she'd been gone for a long time. I want to not be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life, I said. I want there to be a record, so that if she ever tries this with anyone else, they'll see what she's capable of. A trial would give me more of that. Maybe. But it would also give her more attention. More opportunities to paint herself as a victim of circumstance, of a cold mother, of a manipulative husband. Take the plea, Frank said quietly. Make it official. Then live your life. 2 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom that felt colder than the thermostat could explain. Megan and Chase stood side by side at the defense table, both in orange jumpsuits. They'd been separated at the jail, but seeing them together now, they looked like what they were, co-conspirators. Their lawyer read the plea agreement. The judge asked each of them, in turn, if they understood the charges, the sentence, and the rights they were waiving. When he asked, "Are you pleading guilty because you are, in fact, guilty?" There was a long pause before each. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge sentenced them to 10 years each, with the possibility of parole. At 6. He recommended they not be housed in the same facility. As the bailiffs moved to lead them away, Megan glanced back at me. Her eyes weren't pleading. They weren't apologetic. They were cold, assessing. Her mouth moved. I couldn't hear it, but I know how to read lips. 35. Years of patience mouthing words around tubes taught me that. She said, "You did this." In a way, she was right. I had chosen to protect myself, to believe evidence over blood, to turn my training, my stubbornness, and my documentation into weapons against the people who tried to murder me. Did that make me cruel? Maybe some people would think so. But as I walked out of that courthouse into the blinding New Mexico sun, with Frank's solid presence at my side, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. A year later, my house looked different. Not because I'd sold it, I hadn't. Not yet. But because it finally looked lived in again. There were 2 coffee mugs in the sink most mornings, an extra pair of boots by the front door. A jacket that wasn't Tom's was hanging on the hook. Frank didn't move in all at once. It happened like New Mexico seasons. Do slowly. With small shifts. First he was spending a lot of time here, bringing over a toolbox and a favorite chair. Then one day we realized he hadn't slept at his own place in weeks. "Are you sure about this?" he'd asked, standing in my kitchen with a cardboard box of his things. Old mechanics come with a lot of noise. Old nurses come with a lot of opinions. I replied. Seems fair. Lee's. Wrenchin'. We laughed. But there was something wet in both our eyes. We married the next spring, under a cottonwood tree by the Rio Grande. It wasn't a big wedding. A few nurses I'd worked with. Frank's sister, Mrs. Gutierrez. Even Allison came, surprising me with a genuine hug. "You look happy," she said. "I am," I replied. More than I thought I'd be again. We didn't change much legally. I kept my new will, still leaving the bulk to the hospital and nursing scholarships. I added a provision for Frank, enough that he'd be comfortable if I went first. As for Megan, she wrote twice from prison. The first letter arrived 3 months after sentencing. It was 3 pages of how hard things were, how guilty she felt, and how much she needed me to advocate for a lighter sentence. "You know, I'm not a bad person, Mom," she wrote. "I just made a bad choice. Please don't let them keep me here for 10 years. I stared at those words for a long time. Bad people rarely think they are. I drafted a response in my head. One, where I talked about brake lines and spare keys and phone calls scheduling my death. But in the end, I didn't write back. The second letter came around the 1-year mark. Shorter. Sharper. You've chosen strangers and a new husband over your own child, she wrote. When you're old and sick, don't expect me to be there. Frank found me at the table, the letter open, my hands steady for once. What are you going to do? He asked. I folded the paper, slid it back into the envelope, and put it in the same drawer where my brake line photos, will copies, and court documents lived. Nothing, I said. She's telling me who she is. I'm listening. Do I think about her? Of course. When I pass a mother and teenage daughter arguing about something silly at the grocery store, my chest squeezes. When I drive past the prison on the highway, I feel a weight settle between my ribs. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on the back patio and look up at the stars over the mesa and wonder if there was a moment I could have turned her path. A conversation I missed. A hug I didn't give. A no I should have turned into a yes, or vice versa. But then I remember the recordings. The way she said, "Rush," the timeline. The way she looked at me in court, like I'd robbed her of something she was owed. And I remember the kids in the pediatric wing who now have a little more equipment because of the donation in my will. The nursing students, who will someday stand in ERs like I did, their scholarships paid in part by a woman who refused to let greed write her ending. I chose to live for them. And for myself. And for the man who sits next to me on the porch now, his hand warm in mine. One evening, about 18 months after Chase and Megan went to prison, I got a call from Allison. Just wanted you to know, she said. We got a notice that your daughter filed to contest your will. The court sent back a one-line denial, citing the Slayer statute and her conviction. I laughed. It surprised both of us. She really doesn't give up, does she? No, Allison said. But neither do you. After we hung up, I sat with Frank, watching the sun set. The mountains turned, that impossible watermelon pink that locals never get tired of seeing. No matter how many times it happens. Do you ever regret it? Frank asked quietly. Pressing charges. Cutting her out. I thought about it. Really thought. I regret that the choice existed. I said. I regret that she put me in a position where my options were, let her try again, or put her in prison. But choosing to live? Choosing to protect myself? No. I don't regret that. Frank nodded. You know, a lot of people would have forgiven. He said. A lot of people, I replied, are dead because they forgave too much. We sat in comfortable silence then, listening to the distant hum of traffic, the bark of a neighbor's dog, and the rustle of wind in the oleander bushes. Inside, my phone buzzed with a notification from the security app, just a cat cutting across the driveway. I still kept the cameras, not because I was waiting for an attack, but because I liked proof now. Evidence, receipts,